أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين سيدنا محمد سيد البشر وآله وصحبه وسلم أجمعين. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. This is continuing the same book that I put forward, and اللهم صل على سيدنا محمد وآله وصحبه وسلم ومن والاه ومن لم يوالي هذا الرسول إما أن يترك أو يصمت. We have the first contact with the Europeans. We'll have to understand. I've written here, page 27, the first contact with the Europeans, we'll have to understand, was not just 50 years ago, 60 years ago. No way. That was more than 1,300 years. From today, you'll have to imagine 611, Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam left to Al-Rafiq al-A'la. He passed. 611 AD, 711 AD, the Muslims were in Spain, establishing the everybody knows the history of Islamic Spain. So, but bringing all this to Europe last century was simply done by a couple of Orientalists or translators. Some of them, one of the most famous is Richard Burton, Sir Richard Burton, not the actor, Richard Burton, the translator. And he translated the Arabian Nights. He lived from 1821 to 1890. What did he translate? The Arabian Nights. We're always linking the Arab al-Muslimin to the Arabian Nights. Women dressed up like, وَالْعِيَاذُ بِاللَّهِ وَالْعِيَاذُ بِاللَّهِ أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم, like prostitute dancers. Hollywood always shows you al-Harim with the Sultan, with swords and everything. Man, I lived in the Middle East. I've never walked into a tent with a African slave and a Sultan with 600 women. Even James Bond movie, they show you that he wears the Arab dress and he walks into a tent and all these women, they're all from England, man. These women are actors from London. They're dressed up like dancers. Doesn't matter. Translate. He was a geographer, translator, yada yada yada. Everything is written in this book. You can Google Sir Richard F. Burton and you'll find. I don't have to tell you about him. Just read whatever is written about him on the internet. Hollywood grabs whatever he's translated, the genie, Ala-ad-Din, all that, and they misunderstand the translation between Quran, jinn, and the genie of the lamp. So they say, well, min al-jinnati wal-nas. Yes, there is jinn. Of course there's jinn. A'udhu billahi min shaitanir rajim. And they say, well, Quran is part of the culture. So you believe in jinn? You came up with these stories, the Arab have written it, and the whole shebang. Personally, do remember how strong is Hollywood? Hollywood is so strong that if they actually portray Islam the very correct way, half of China would wake up the following morning going, Ashhadu an la ilaha illallah wa ashhadu Muhammad Rasulullah. Who knows? I do remember watching movies. Every time we used to see an Indian movie with a Punjabi, we used to think he's a magician. Why? Because every cartoon portrays those Punjabis, Indians, as magicians. And that's where it comes from. The British Empire was the second source, or the most source, that actually provided the Europeans with a lot of sources, especially when it comes to Gertrude Bell. Khatun. Gertrude Bell was basically look at her as the queen consort of Iraq. Iraq was the prize. Even Michael Schwer from the CIA, ex-CIA agent, he says Iraq is the most holiest country. We didn't know that we were going into Iraq. We were going into the second holiest country. Yes, it's the seat of the Abbasid. So Gertrude Bell basically lived in Iraq, and she was side by side with King or Emir Faisal, the king, the prince, the son of King Al-Hussein bin Ali, the king of Hijaz. Hashemite left Al-Hijaz after Truba, the battle of Truba, and after the battle of Mecca, And Medina, Al Saud took over the Hijaz, the Hashemite moved north. Abdullah the first became the Emir, then the king of Jordan. His brother Faisal became the king of Syria, and then the French took Syria. It was like a piece of cake, and all of those just went and started cutting it. So you're talking about people who did not have the jihad. 95% were not basically educated in the Arab world or in the Islamic world. It's not like today. Today you can have a lot of people who are educated. Those people, those days, no one was educated practically. The desert did its own thing. Education was only in Damascus, Baghdad, Cairo, Tunisia, all of these big major cities. In the deserts of Jordan, they were all Bedouins. In the deserts of Najd, they were all Bedouins. Even in Kuwait, there was hardly any education. Not like Al-Mubarakiyya maybe was the first school that the Emir of Kuwait has actually established after they had some oil. It was only when they had money that they've established schools and they started pushing for education, which was something good. Gertrude Bell basically was known as the queen, the desert queen, that basically drew lines in the sand for Churchill. She had an interview with Abdulaziz Al Saud, the king of Abdulaziz Al Saud. She was kidnapped once and held hostage by the Al Rashid. She would have actually met Abdulaziz Al Saud way back 5 years before she even met him. She lived from 1868 to 1926. Basically, she is the mother of Sykes-Picot. If you want to think of Sykes-Picot, she's the mother. And one thing I remember about her story, which was really sad, when she was passing with Al-Arab al-Ruwayla, those are Ruwayla Arabs, they had some rivalry between them and Shammar and whatever. She asked about an Umayyad sort of fort. She asked her Arab guide who built this, and he said, we were hoping you would tell us. There you go, this fella killed himself. He shot himself in the bullet. Unfortunately, from that day onwards, the British have been writing history for the Arab and Muslim and telling them, read, and they've been spoon feeding them ever since. This fella killed himself. He didn't know this was an Umayyad. In today's Jordan, it was, I'm not sure if it's Qusayr Amr or one of those Mushatta, as they used to say. The Umayyads used to have a lot of palaces around. Just like today you have an emir or a king with a lot of palaces, the Umayyads also had a lot of palaces. But this fella didn't even know his own history. Gertrude Bell was atheist. She didn't believe in the Sharia law. She had a lot of problems with people who were actually holding onto the Quran. She met a lot of sharifs who are basically descendants of the Prophet ﷺ, descendants of Al-Hasan or Al-Husayn. We call them sharif. So she had a lot of people talking to a lot of sharifs in Iraq, and she found it really hard to bring Faisal as an emir and make him a king of Iraq, because the sharif also, they had rivalry amongst themselves. But she was an atheist. She drew constitution. She learned Arabic. She's buried in Iraq. She's become Arabicized. Anyone who speaks Arabic becomes an Arabic. Just like Sayyidina Ismail alayhi salam. Moving on to T.E. Lawrence. There's no one famous on this planet besides two, Superman and Lawrence of Arabia. Or maybe Batman comes next. Lawrence of Arabia basically did not care about whether giving the Arab their independence or not. The British came in to tell us just like how they removed Saddam. We're here to rescue you from this dictatorship, and they were there to rescue us from ourselves, the Muslims. They're here to rescue us from the Ottoman Turks. The Ottoman Turks became very rogue and bad. Why did they become rogue and bad? Because the agents started taking bribes. They sold Palestine themselves. They started slaughtering Arabs left, right, and center. Abdul Hamid II had nothing to do with this, but the empire became so big, it was so riddled with munafiqeen, and wherever there is a munafiq, there's an agent, and wherever there is jahl. Muhammad al-Ghazali Sheikh Muhammad al-Ghazali from Al-Azhar Sharif, not Muhammad al-Ghazali, who just passed. Muhammad al-Ghazali, rahimahullah, he passed about 20 years ago. He said, it's enough that you are a jahil in your deen. If you do not understand your deen, if you're ignorant in your deen, you're a tool. You're merely a tool in the hands of the others. The idea of separating these countries into little Mamalik or Emirat, if you see, we are bigger than Australia, and we have smaller countries. Like Jordan is smaller than Victoria, the state of Victoria. Imagine if you tell an Australian Victoria might become a country, and New South Wales become, he'll lose his mind. Dude, we have Lebanon is as small as Melbourne. Jordan is half Victoria. The whole of the Sham area is between New South Wales and Victoria, and we have separate governments, and people are not, we're not united. If you tell this to an Australian, he'll lose his mind. But it happened. The Young Turks added more insult to injury by being secular, and the British found a way to go in and cut this piece of cake. We had no education, no weapons, no money whatsoever, and we went against us. None of this waged jihad except for a very few. Umar al-Mukhtar, rahimahullah, Abdul Qadir al-Husayni, and just a few who waged jihad. The others basically obliged and went in because they hardly had any budgets. Quran wasn't major except for what Glob Basha said, John Glob, who became the head of the Arab army in Jordan. He said he found it very difficult. Why? According to Lawrence of Arabia, he told him you won't find two Arabs agreeing together. Any person who sells falafel on the streets of Jordan or Alexandria would have told you that. But hey, those are Oxford people, so anything they write is a source, Wow, those people, dude, you know stuff, Anyone would have told you that. Sunnat al-Haya, it's become the Sunnah. But they found it very difficult to understand. Why was the Quran dealt with even from the streets right up to the government departments? They thought it had to be contained within a spiritual context only in the masjid. Well, it can't happen that way. Lawrence of Arabia, he traveled all the way by the King of Hijaz, with also Emir Faisal, all the way up to Aqaba, took it from the Turks, and from there everybody wanted a piece of that action. At the same time, it wasn't the only empire that was there. There was another empire, which is the Russian Empire, and the Russian Empire, which is the communist empire. They found it easy to penetrate into the Arabs, and especially the educated Arabs, to basically, they did a better job, وَالْعِيَاذُ بِاللَّهِ, in taking Arabs off Islam than any other race, because they spread socialism, and socialism, they catered it for the Muslim environment. They said Islam is socialism, أعطوا من غنيكم إلى فقرائكم وآتوا من الأغنياء إلى الفقراء. Take from your rich and give to the poor. That's how socialism works. And socialism penetrated more than capitalist ideas, and it went all the way into the educational levels. After that came Sykes-Picot in 1915. The whole Arab world was basically ripe. As they say, you have been cooking for a while. Now it's ready to just cut that cake and throw it away somewhere. Give each his own whatever. It was all about trade routes, resources, gas, oil. Oil was one of the most important. And according to what Lawrence of Arabia said, he said, if you want to rule those people, rule them through the emir. And they've entered emir into the Oxford Dictionary, and they said, well, what does it actually mean? They said, well, it's a monarchy. You can't use any other words, but use emir, because emir in certain areas means a prince, and in certain sheikdoms it would mean king. In Kuwait it's king, it's a monarchy. In Saudi Arabia it's a prince, because you've got a king, actually Malik. From there, the Sykes-Picot basically drew the lines and separated the Arabs for good right till today. Every time something happens and you try and squash the Muslims, other Muslims come up and say, dude, let's get rid of Sykes-Picot, because that's the main thing that irks him, basically. Saint John Philby was a minister with Abdulaziz Al Saud, lived from 1885 to 1916. This is a funny character. He became on the Shura Council. Subhanallah. We had Philby on our Shura Council. In Al-Hijaz, they didn't like him. In Najd, he became an advisor for Abdul Malik Al Saud, Abdulaziz Al Saud. He told him, you have to just become a Muslim. So he called him Abdullah. So he became known as Abdullah Philby. And in Al-Hijaz, every time they saw him, they used to call him Abd al-Qirsh, the slave of the penny. You are the Abd al-Bayza, Abd al-Dirham wa dinar. In the oil concessions, he was even taking a cut from every time the Americans sucked at the oil. He used to get a cut out of it. Thank God, he upset King Saud, which is the son of Abdulaziz, and he slapped him and lashed him and took his money and threw him in Lebanon. His son, however, became part of the Cambridge Five. He was a spy to Russia. And Kim, his name is Kim, and Kim Philby died in Russia. La'natullah al-munafiqeen. Anyway, Abdul Kirsch wrote a lot of things and changed history, and those people used to teach us how to learn our own history. Globe Basha wrote the Arabian Conquest, and with it he wanted to tell us that it was just the character of Rasulullah ﷺ that basically was magical, which is not true. It's not just the shakhsiyat Rasulullah ﷺ. وَمَا كَانَ إِلَّا وَحْيًا يُوحَى. He denied the fact of Wahyan Yuha. He denied the fact of, never mind his son Faris. His son Faris was a Muslim. He's an Ahl Sunnah wal Jama'ah, but it's him. He's the one who became the source in Cambridge and Oxford, and people are studying of him. And I'm going to come in through episodes telling you what he used to say and how he used to explain. He explained that Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam wal billah and the Sahaba al-Kiram were like thugs living in Medina, like Arab marauders. They used to attack caravans. Why? Because the Arabs did this. Why? Because Mr. Globe Basha lived with the Bedouins. So he assumes, oh, I have enough sources. I know how those people live, They attack, they steal, they just like Sayyidina Rasulullah and his Sahaba. No way. So he said they lived in poverty like refugees. Yes, salam. MashaAllah. He thinks he knows, and he wrote the Great Arab Conquest, and unfortunately he's used as a source. That's a source? I'll kill myself before I even read his sources and treat him as sources. Once I remember more about those and what they used to say about Islam and how they presented them, this is how Europe, those Orientalists basically, they portrayed Islam, how they saw it. And unfortunately, they became the sources of Islam to the West. The intellect. And there's a map on page 34. This is how it looks like a big cake. والله المستعان والصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين والحمد لله رب العالمين الحمد لله في نعمك وكافي عدم السلطان.